Well, good morning. My name is Tim Cavey, and as you just heard, I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I'm very honored to be joined today by 5 amazing educators from my home province of British Columbia, and our topic is assessment. So I can't wait to get into this one. Welcome here. If you are viewing us, let us know where you're coming from. I'm going to open by turning it over to my guests. My question for you is this: what is your current context in education? Tell us about where you are coming from, starting with Shannon.
Good morning, Tim. So I'm so pleased to be here. I am teaching on the unceded ancestral lands of the Clay-Tenay, otherwise known as Prince George, School District 57. I've been a teacher for 23 years. I specialize in drama and English and Humanities 8. I also have a new role this semester, which is a teaching to diversity through assessment role, which is where I'm working with teachers, helping them become more inclusive educators, helping them with differentiated instruction and building proficiency sequences. I'm also a blogger and a speaker, and I am the administrator of 2 Facebook platforms, the Humanity Zone and Beyond Report Cards.
You are a very busy person, Shannon, just like many of the people here around this circle. So thank you for joining us and for really kicking off this conversation today. Nina, I'm happy to call Nina a friend. Nina, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am respectfully acknowledging that I work and learn on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kwantlen First Nation, Katzie First Nation, and the Stalo First Nation. And the context that I work in is teacher education. And I teach 3rd and 4th year student teachers about curriculum design and assessment and evaluation for learning.
All right. Thank you for being here, Nina. Over to Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Stringer, and I'm in Vancouver, so I'm on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I've been teaching for about 25 years. I've taught in private and public schools. I completed my Master's of Educational Technology in 2007 and have worked as an educational technology coordinator in 2 different independent schools, which landed me at my current school, where I set up the laptop, the one-to-one program, and now I'm the department head of mathematics there. And I'm also a research chair at that same school with a topic area of how do we learn and looking at cognitive science.
That's not a big question at all. How do we learn? Josh, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Josh Ogilvie. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, which lies in the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Katzie, Musqueam, Kaikwet, Squamish, and Stolo nations. My role in education, I'm a full-time teacher. I'm a department head of physical and health education. I'm also one of the leads on our new curriculum that was implemented a few years back. I'm also acting as the president of our Provincial Specialist Association and representing PHE at the national level across Canada. More important than that, and my roles in education will always come first and foremost from the home, where I have 2 young ones, a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, who are teaching me more than I could ever imagine every single day.
That is awesome. I think many of us could say the same. Absolutely. And Katie, welcome here. Over to you.
Hi, thanks everyone. It's really nice to be here. I'm honored to be here and be a guest on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Clay-Tenay. I am a vice principal at Prince George Secondary School. I'm actually the vice principal at Shannon's school. It's awesome to work with her. I am passionate about inclusive education and really creating structures that support inclusion and teaching to diversity. I'm also a yoga teacher, and so I'm currently drawing on my knowledge of being calm in my breath work while I'm here live with you. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And I want to say hello to a few viewers who have chimed in here. Sherry coming from Georgia, and to us from Coquitlam, and Ralph watching from Dubai. Welcome, Ralph. I'm actually going to be on another conversation based in the United Arab Emirates tomorrow morning, so look forward to that. Question number 2, let's get right into this. We're talking today about something called ACBC, and I want to get this right. It's the Assessment Consortium of British Columbia, correct? So we want to talk about, first of all, right at the beginning, how did this thing start? And Josh, I'll turn it over to you to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks. If anybody recalls kind of the processes we're all going through when the lockdown first happened in March and April, the world turned upside down. And, you know, it was had a lot of time where I wasn't at school because we were trying to figure out what we're going to do with our continuing learning via virtual means. And then I started thinking about what is happening in our province here in British Columbia. And we've had a tremendous amount of change over the last 8 years with the development and then the rollout of our new curriculum. And I mentioned earlier that I was involved with that process, and it's been fantastic. And there's just so many great practices and champions in our province on things to help improve learning. But then I realized, is there a whole lot that connects our province via assessment? And I mean, yes, there's a lot of great people, but there's nothing really where people can kind of gravitate towards to kind of help move their practices forward with that. And so I did what I called the people my Jerry Maguire moment. If you remember the movie at the beginning where he just lays his heart out and just says, here's what's going on. And I contacted a few people that I know or that I've connected with on social media and other means that are just incredibly literate in assessment. And I gave them my Jerry Maguire moment. Like, here's a thought that I have that can really help our field here in British Columbia move forward with assessment practice, because assessment, something is coming left, right, and center. It's coming from all angles. And everybody has questions about it, but where can they go? And so I just figured we've got so many great minds here in BC. Let's start small and build something that can really help the practitioners at not just K through 12, but K through 16 in post-secondary school, kind of develop some sort of common understanding and practice of what assessment could look like. And so that's when I reached out, and I can't remember the exact time frame, but I think it was within half a day that they heard my plea and they're like, yep, I'm in. And just like that, no convincing, just like, count me in. And I was like, awesome. So that's going to be in a nutshell.
What you're saying is you got some interest on the topic of assessment from Shannon Schinkel and Nina Pak Lui. That I'm amazed. I'm so surprised. No, of course you've got some very willing people here in this province, and there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of interest around assessment. So my sense is you really formalized it. You sought to bring it together and give it that common resource. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Nina, why a consortium? What do you see as your mission? Why come together in this way?
Okay, so I'll answer the first one, why a consortium? And I took some notes because...
Of course you did.
We're very organized as teachers.
Yeah, it's not a committee because it's not just to be like a think tank, right? We are a group of people who are in agreement and we're committed to take action. So like taking action is a really key piece. I'm committed to put new ideas into practice. All of us are putting it into practice in whatever space we occupy, like that we are in right now, and we're reflecting and improving. And this idea of working together and not alone. And I really like this line, how we are rebels for hope and we press for innovation. And we are all kind of like united in our efforts. So this consortium is the space where teachers across the province can, go to and turn to, where they know that these people here are united in their efforts to move assessment literacy forward. And we are also committed to significant and meaningful improvement. And I mean, to just surround ourselves with really thoughtful practitioner leaders and that people can find others like-minded practitioners in this space. And then there's people here in the consortium who listen. We want to challenge long-held traditions when necessary and collaborate to make things better. And so it's this idea that we are effective, better, stronger together, and that success in this challenging work, it's really hard and it requires support. Other things that I wrote down is that this group, we're aware of the need for change, always open to learning, and we're ready to publicly advocate for recommended reforms, not just K to 12, it's K to post-secondary, and we're eager to share our beliefs and take action together. So that's why it's a consortium.
All right, mic drop moment right there. Shannon, you've already done so much with Beyond Report Cards on Facebook. I know we'll talk more about that later, but why the consortium and what do you see as your mission here?
I think there's a real appetite to talk about assessment. Like when I started Beyond Report Cards, I had no idea that it was going to become, a pretty big thing on Facebook, but it's also it's limiting because it's a Facebook group. I started that, and over the course of like a week, we had several hundred teachers and that kind of thing. But I realized very quickly that there is an appetite to talk about assessment, that there are so many educators who feel like they're either an island where they're trying to go at it alone. I know, even on my own journey, you kind of rely on social media and kind of find your people, right, to be able to hold hands with and guide each other home, really. I just think it's such a wonderful opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Let's put our heads together. Let's have this as a place where we can discuss all things assessment, where, we're, like Nina said, we're radicals. Like we're all radicals to some extent because we're trying to make waves with regards to assessment. We're trying to steer towards change, whether it is gradeless assessment, whether it's, more feedback for learning and differentiated instruction and inclusive education. And it's like, this is going to be the place where we can come together and be united on our mission.
That's awesome. I want to welcome others to the broadcast. Marissa is joining us. Thank you, Marissa, for your comment. She says, quoting you, "We're ready and you are welcome to find out more from us." Love that you're creating that message and space for this important, purposeful, and totally possible change. And Christine is with us as well from the Sunshine Coast. And she's writing assessment action advocacy is brilliant. Well, I like going back to Nina's Rebels of Hope, that maybe that's a new trending hashtag I'll have to poke around for. I don't know. I haven't seen that in EduTwitter yet, but maybe it's out there. What are your own assessment stories? That's where we want to go next. And these can be powerful. Obviously, they're shaping. And that's what we want to look at. How have they shaped your thinking? So, Katie, let me turn it over to you. Tell us about your assessment story or your journey with assessment.
Really, where I first started is for a few years, I was a district resource teacher in School District 57, and I worked quite closely with and was mentored by Shelley Moore. And I did a lot of work with her on how do we teach to the range? How do we support wise practice in the classroom and inclusive practice and universal design? And that's actually where I met Shannon, and we did some work together. And right from that position, I went in to become an administrator. And it took all of the things that I knew about wise practice, and my shift became from doing it in the classroom into removing barriers for great teachers and great educators that are doing this work already, being able to identify the great work that's being done and going right. And so Shannon and I work closely together, and I'm learning really from this team what they need to continue to do their work. Because really, I'm behind the scenes, I'm not in the classroom. I am supporting, structurally supporting this great work. So.
Thank you, Katie. Josh, tell us about your journey with assessment.
I'll try to keep it short. My journey begins as a student when I always questioned what I was being assessed on. I never knew the term assessment. I would call it tested. And I was going along with this Rebels of Hope, I was quite a rebel in school. When we have foundational skills assessment or standardized testing, so to speak, is I always rebelled against them. I never wrote one in my schooling career. And I just basically said, that test can't tell you what I know, right? And your test, the things you're testing me on, you're not finding out what I know. It's always based on what you want to find out, but it's not what I know. So fast forward many years into my career, I was excited when I started teaching. I was so passionate and just so much fire under me. And there was twice in the first 10 years of my career. I'm entering year 18 right now, where I almost left teaching. And because it became stagnant, became boring, and I realized that I had become the teacher that the experiences I was when I was a student. And there was a kind of a spark moment at a parent-teacher interview where I got completely exposed when a parent asked me how I arrived at a certain grade. And I had my beautifully drawn up formula based on just decisions I made, like, attendance, on time, and all these non-learning factors. And the parent called me out for that and just said, none of that relates to what they're supposed to be learning, in front of their child, the student I was working with. So I realized there has to be a better way. And if not, then I'm leaving. And luckily for me, I found a better way. And I can almost to the day, I can pinpoint like two halves of my career, when I was not assessment literate and when I dove into assessment. And since that time, when I've been diving into assessment, the career that I've had, been fortunate to have, is completely changed. It's become so dynamic. And it's not, I don't want to be cliche or anything, but like, I truly do love going to school every Monday morning, because we're in face-to-face here in BC. And the experiences that I've had to learn about the students that I get to work with and what they've taught me and what I've learned from them and vice versa, I can't even recognize who I used to be as a teacher. And I look at assessment as being the platform, the bridge to finding out about students. What can we do to support them? How can they support the class? How can they support each other? It's not about designing good quizzes and tests. Those are just simple tools we might use, but I believe that assessment is a true window into the community, the culture in your classroom setting. And as teachers, we have a very strong part to play in that. So the more that I've dove in and become a practitioner in assessment, like, teaching has taken on a whole new context and a whole new meaning for me. And it's just something that it's completely changed who I am as a person and as a teacher. So that's 18 years and I hope just a few minutes.
That was amazing, Josh. Yeah, the deeper we go into assessment, the more we realize it really is the core of everything we do. All of our practice sort of originates from our philosophy of assessment. I'm so curious about you skipping the FSAs. Did you have your parents' support on that, or what did that look like in the classroom?
Love my parents. My parents are awesome. I had a very high-performing older brother, 1 year older, so I had the typical middle child syndrome. You tend to be forgotten. They never saw my report card since grade 9. And I always created lame excuses, this, that. And you know what? Should they have? I was passing. I mean, mainly because you didn't fail, but I ended up graduating with an average of 72 or something. I got into post-secondary, and it's because I was unchallenged. And I knew those FSAs, those standardized tests weren't going to do anything. And the school never called me out. They were just like, okay. And to this day, I don't know how I got through, but I did. I've never written one.
Well, those little 4th and 7th graders, that would take a lot of courage, I think, to say, no, I'm not writing this, unless they had some support in the classroom or something like that. But impressive. Well, thank you for sharing your journey, Josh. Phil, over to you. What does that look like for you? And
so as I said, I was an educational technology coordinator about 10 or 15 years ago. And one of my jobs was to help the teachers use a new online gradebook. And up until that point, I had just done my own thing. I was a math teacher mostly. I did the typical 85% of your mark is going to get generated from tests and 15 from quizzes and homework and everything else. And it was the first time I really had some assessment questions, because I was now having to help other people. I had never looked into anyone else's gradebook, and I was now having to help other people kind of program their gradebooks. At about the same time, I attended a workshop in Kelowna called CanFlip on implementing the flipped classroom in classes. And that's actually the first time I ever heard about standards-based grading. And I just shelved it. It was one of the things that I was like, okay, that's kind of neat. Went to a couple sessions on it over maybe 2 years of going to CanFlip. And then I guess worlds collided at some point when I thought, the way that we are building our gradebooks, the way that I'm helping these other teachers with just generating percentages, and I kept hearing, well, the computer says, the program says your mark is this. So, the teachers just put their hands up and said, that's it, that's what it is. And I would say things like, well, how do you know that that test should be worth 30% of their mark? Or how do you know that that assignment is, what is it actually covering? And then those questions of like, what's the difference between 84 and 82%? And you just start having a harder and harder time answering those. So I love the phrase that the computer programs give those percentages to 2 or 3 decimal places, and that's really just an illusion of validity. There's no real score that you can get to the 100th decimal place. And maybe as a math teacher, I understand that. So I started implementing flipped classroom, and like any of my fellow rebels here, I decided to start that with my grade 12s. I started it with my AP Calculus AB class, and that was the only class I was doing it with for that year. I think that was 2014 or 2015 school year. And then I just expanded it, and luckily, I've got such amazing people in my department. They started wanting to know what this thing was, this kind of new way of looking at the learning outcomes rather than at the percentages. And so standards-based grading kind of took off in my department and started taking off across the school, where other departments were really interested in it, until a couple of years ago, where the whole school decided that this is the direction that we need to go for our senior school. Started working with all the heads of department and the admin to implement a fully structured standards-based grading program, and rolled that out last year for all our grade 8s, and now have expanded it to our grade 9s, and looking to expand it into the future. So yeah, it's been quite a 180 if I look back on my former self 15 years, 25 years ago, doing completely different things with assessment.
That is so cool. You mentioned rolling it into 9th grade. It only gets more difficult from there, right? Because you always end up back at that conversation about university admission. But you also mentioned earlier that idea of looking into other people's grade books, which I find so interesting. We don't get that enough. Grade books are sort of a tightly held sacred space, I think, for a lot of educators. It's like, nope, don't go there. I'm not sharing mine, but boy, when people actually do share, I know Tyler Rablin was sharing some of his this week on Twitter, it is so helpful just to see how other people are structuring their assessment. Nina, over to you with this all-important question of what is your assessment journey? What can you share from your story?
Okay, I hope I can get through this without crying. 3 years ago, I joined teacher education full-time. I was part-time instructor since 2014, teaching, backwards design, understanding by design. And then 3 years ago, when I joined full-time, I was assigned to teach this course, assessment. And, like with any kind of course that's new, you do a massive deep dive into the literature. And that first semester teaching it, I was really humbled and somewhat humiliated that there was just so much I didn't know myself. I was telling this group, there were many, many nights where I would read the text and the resources and wanted to chuck it out the window, because it was revealing to me there's just so many gaps in my own assessment literacy. And so I really felt like that first semester was such a transformative semester with with the student teachers that I teach. We were going through this transformation together. It was so powerful. And then since then, it's just been reading lots, surrounding myself with critical colleagues like Josh, Shannon, and Phil, and really just trying to implement the practices that we're trying to promote for new teachers in my own practice, trying to model it and have student teachers experience it. And when they share their narratives about their own journeys with assessment, and even if I think about my own, it's sometimes very difficult to read because it's affected how they see themselves as human beings, their self-worth, their dignity, a lot of negative narratives, and then realizing wow, this class is a lot of it. It has to do with unlearning, and am I willing to be open to a new narrative, another narrative that is backed up by research and evidence. So that's my story, and where I am today is it's such a joy, and I feel like such a privilege that I get to introduce principles of assessment to new teachers, have them wrestle with their story, and then look at possibilities and imagine what it could be. It's such a privileged position to be in, and feeling super blessed. And then I think the last thing I want to end off is that the literature that I'm using is for K-12 teachers, but I'm implementing it in higher education, proving that it also works in post-secondary. Like, this is not just for K-12. It is for it's for all learners. I had to get special permission to be the rebel and like change my grading structure, take away the weights of assignments, and set up a grade book that is more standards-based, have a heavier focus on formative assessment, sound design, all the principles. It works in post-secondary, getting recognized for it. So that's a bit of my story, and just like everybody else, it's the inclusion piece, the equity piece, human dignity piece, hope and joy, all of that. So that's part of my story.
It's just everything. It's just everything. That's all it is. Yeah, no, absolutely. It does work at the postgraduate or the graduate level, I should say. Shout out to VIU, Vancouver Island University, and Paige Fisher, who really opened my master's in educational leadership program with this same question about, assessment journeys. And I have to say, in the 2 wonderful years that I studied there, I did not receive marks. No marks throughout the program. A lot of feedback, a lot of growth, transformation, I would say, but no marks, no grades. So it definitely is doable, and it can be a fantastic experience. Shannon, we'll end this round with you. Tell us about your assessment journey, your story.
Oh, they're a hard act to follow. So there's 2 things that were very significant for me as a teacher. So I don't remember a time when I wasn't some kind of an assessment rebel. I've been doing it for so long, the line is blurred. I cannot remember when I actually started everything from, removing zeros. I was the type of person that whatever I read and I trusted from trusted like edu gurus, or I went to workshops, when I took it very much to heart. But there's 2 pivotal moments in my career, and that was when I started my career, I got placed into teaching in special ed. And when you teach students with needs, you see them in a different light because you see them on their own learning journeys, and that they're goal setting, and that they're not ranked and sorted like we would do in our academic classes. It's like, you are here, what are your next steps? Not hugely powerful and influential to me, especially when I started making learning maps with Katie and Shelley Moore and that kind of thing. But the second one is too, being a drama educator and being already an inclusive educator. One of the things I noticed in my classroom was that, kids in these elective classes don't care so much about their grades. They care about their learning. And so I went through several years where I was literally trying to unpack, what am I doing that's right in this elective class that I can bring into the academic classes? How can I foster that love of learning and that drive, and that, they're veering away. They don't care about grades. They're not asking me, what's my mark? What did I get on this? They're taking feedback, they're eating it up, and they're moving forward. And I remember hearing from colleagues that, well, it's an elective class. I'm like, I think this is going to be something that can be brought into academic classes. So I delved deep into, how can I bring feedback for learning into the classroom, into my academic classroom, because I teach both. And it works. When you give feedback to kids and you tell them that it's not a competition, I am not going to rank and sort you. I am going to, that has been my passion. Everything from, again, feedback for learning, getting rid of letter grades, introducing, standards-based grading with my students. And now I have been delving really deep into brain science. And I'm finding that, hearing from these voices like Carol Dweck and Joe Hirsch, and that this is really important for 21st century creative and innovative minds, that this whole the gradeless movement and these assessment shifts are going to be huge for the future. So I just feel my ideas were very backed up by science, by brain science, by this literature, by this research, and it works. So again, those were my 2 really impactful moments. Honoring the learner And that's what I use a lot. I tell my colleagues, I said, assessment needs to be this intimate experience, and very much like what Josh and Nina and Katie and Phil talk about in terms of the grade book. No child can be labeled by a percentage or a letter grade, and that the best thing that we can do for their self-esteem is to honor them and see where they're at and where they need to go to next. And it's powerful, super powerful.
Mm-hmm. Amazing stuff. Sherry says yes to brain science. Christine says read Shannon's blog. Get more of this good stuff over there. And Christine is also encouraging Nina, ask permission to be a rebel. It seems a bit counterintuitive. I think she's enjoying a joke.
Or just be a rebel and ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. I mean,
there we go.
Have at her.
There's context to that, because of all the policies, like at universities, there's so many policies that are made transparent. So,
right. Well, hey, teachers are good about, acting first and getting that forgiveness later. It's better to get forgiveness than permission. I always say sometimes, so I have to be careful now that I'm making my way into administration, but sometimes it's actually a gift to an administrator to give them that plausible deniability. Christine says, tried to do no grades in one of my teacher ed classes, and now our program is gradeless. Amazing. Lots of pushback from candidates, lots of uncertainty. This will be a journey. Absolutely. And I've lived that too with classmates who are saying, well, hey, hold on. How do I get an A here? What are you telling me? This is so disorienting. Lisa says, we just had to go through a round of international benchmark testing, and she's in Dubai again, or the UAE. And I tried to get the kids through it by explaining it was not a judgment on them, but to find out how we can improve teaching. So sort of presenting it as assessment of the teachers. That's kind of neat to let students know that, hey, we're not perfect. We want to grow here in this journey as well. I like that spin. All right, so we're going to work our way back around to some of the services that U5 are planning to offer and some of the events coming up. But next up on the docket, we have this question. Who are the voices who have influenced and inspired your assessment journey? We kind of laughed before the program. There are so many that we could mention, but hopefully if we each mention one or two here, a lot of the big names will come out, and we'll say in advance, apologies if we're not mentioning all of the voices, but who are some of the voices who have influenced and continue to influence your journey with assessment? Let's loop it back around, starting with you, Shannon.
Okay. All right, I'm going to be really quick. So the voices that impacted me, definitely Dylan William and Rick Wormley, and their books, Embedded Formative Assessment, Fair Isn't Always Equal. Rick does a really good job of, calling out educators that not to play gotcha with kids. And I love Dylan Williams' information about what actual formative assessment is. So working really hard with descriptive feedback. But two other incredible voices, Dr. Jody Carrington. She's got a wonderful passion for teachers and what we do. And that connection is a huge piece, especially when we're talking about assessment, because assessment can change the environment of our classroom and be that important connecting piece. And then of course my sister, Shelley Moore, has impacted me so much building proficiency sequences, which is what I, consider Learning Maps 2.0. She's making waves, and I just have so much respect for her, and I thank her very much for inspiring me to keep doing the work I do.
4 great names to start us off. Nina's checking her list. Nina, who you've got next?
I can't stick to 2. There's no way.
I did.
So I'll just list it all off. For sure. Grant Wiggins, Jay McTeague, Dylan Williams, Ken O'Connor, Katie White. Big influence, okay? Tom Schimmer, Dr. Thomas Guskey. Just want to make sure Susan Brookhart. Let's see, and Chapuis and Stiggins, foundational, Chapuis and Stiggins. Mm-hmm. And obviously Dr. Benjamin Bloom. We forget about him, Dr. Benjamin Bloom. And then the 2 others that I do want to mention, I have to mention this. It's Dr. Paige Fisher and Dr. Leighton Schnellert. It's the way that they envision change that comes through collaboration and community. They are huge influencers in the way that I foresee how change can be accomplished. So there you go. Those are the names.
Yeah, Mark says this is like the Oscars. Play the music. Exactly, yeah. Mark. I need some kind of grand music. We need a red carpet here. But I think Nina stole a lot of the stars of assessment, let's say. Actually, I can think of a few names. So we'll see if Phil hits more of them. And by the way, when this blog post does come out, I'll try my best to itemize all of these names and make sure you can connect over there at teachersonfire.net. But Phil, go ahead. Who else is shaping and influencing your journey today?
Yeah, thanks. Well, for sure, these four, for sure. And Tom Schimmer, I mean, he's local. He's from BC. He gets the curriculum and the direction that this group are going in. I think for sure. Ken O'Connor as well. He's just so active on Twitter, and probably one of the first people I connected with in my assessment journey on Twitter. More recently, and also local, the BC AMT have been hosting some assessment talks, run with the leadership of Peter Liljedahl out of SFU, who's I've certainly had lots of assessment conversations with him over the years. And as I said, I'm also interested in the brain science, and I think assessment, as we've chatted about a little bit today, I think assessment does sit in brain science as well. And so some foundational people there like Barbara Oakley. She's got a great Coursera course on learning how to learn. And I think the original three who wrote Make It Stick. So that's Henry Rodiger, Mark McDaniel, and Peter Brown. And I was actually lucky enough to work with Mark McDaniel a couple of years ago before COVID when I met him in Boston. And I think there's a lot of information in that book as well that is very applicable to teaching and learning and assessment.
Someone just mentioned the math connection, and that was Christine Younghusband. Sorry, Christine. And you mentioned Peter Liljedahl at SFU. I heard an amazing podcast episode on making math moments that matter. He was a guest, and I believe he's written a book called The Thinking Classroom or something connected to that. Just it sounds like an amazing read, so it's definitely on my to-read list. Josh, over to you. Who have we got left?
Nobody. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know one of the ways I've connected to the folks here is through social media and through conversations with many of the individuals that were listed here. At risk of repeating what's already been said, Tom Schimmer, Katie White, Ken O'Connor, Rick Wormley, Dylan Willem, all of them had huge influences on me and still do to this day. But I'd be remiss, and I know everybody's on the same page, if I didn't say first and foremost, the people who have the biggest influence on my assessment pedagogy are definitely the students, right? Like I can take all the theory stuff, implement it, and if it's not working for them, then I have to readjust. And I think that's something that the authors, the presenters, the people who are out there really trying to move our practices forward can give us a lot of principles and practices to try. And for me, as with the students, it's the people who have really helped me accept permission to try and fail. Judy Halbert, Linda Kaiser, Paige Fisher at VIU. Like you, Tim, I did my master's at VIU. And I remember going through that process or the program and just like, here are these amazing individuals at the post-secondary master's level saying, try, give yourself permission to fail. I'm like, if we can do that here, what can our K-12 experience look like, right? So for them, those were definitely impactful. One of the first books I ever picked up that changed my actual practice was Carol Ann Tomlinson's Differentiating Instruction, or the Classroom, and with her KUD charts, way before the BC curriculum came out. I was just like, it was like a foundational piece to really, you can't do those and not get into assessment. So I definitely want to mention her as well. So definitely what everybody's mentioned there, and adding on a few more if I could.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's one name that I'm curious to see if it'll come up. Katie, you've got a tough job. I mean, I think these four have taken about 30 or 40 names off the table, but is there anyone left that has influenced your journey?
Not really. I've got some doubling up here. Definitely Shelley Moore and Leighton Schneller really shifted my whole thinking of how we design our lessons and our units to teach to the range. How do we teach to who's in the room, not sending kids out to different places to learn? And this group actually, so assessment isn't my expertise, inclusive practice is my expertise, but I take the expertise of this group and merge it with what I already know of how we teach to the range. And the last kind of layer that's been slowly adding to my learning are voices like Joe Crona, Dr. Dustin Louie out of University of Calgary, really challenging my thinking around what is equitable practice, right? And bringing the First Peoples principles of learning and the Indigenous kind of lens of, our support, our systems, and whether or not they're actually equitable for all of our learners.
Awesome. Yeah, a couple of names. I'm not sure if they came up, but Star Saxteen, Hacking Assessment. Did anyone mention her? Yeah, just really helpful, engaging book. And you five are such serious students as well. You're into so much graduate level stuff. For that teacher who is maybe just poking around and maybe isn't looking for 5 citations every paragraph, Hacking Assessment might be a better place to start, maybe. And I know fair isn't always equal. Is that the title of Rick Wormley's book and others? There are a few great on-ramps. And also one more name, Brooke Moore here from Delta. I don't know if anyone mentioned her, but another amazing leader in this space. And she was very influential at VIU as well. She has a great story, by the way, of teaching a movement in parkour to middle school students, and then having them give each other feedback, and then sort of at the end of it all, having that debrief to say, okay, now which would have been more helpful, the feedback that you received or percentages or letter grades, right? And to students, it's a no-brainer. And so that sort of orients them for the framework of feedback. Well, moving on in our discussion, we want to get back to some of your work and your upcoming work. So we're talking next about the Launch and Learn EDCAMP event. I'm so excited that EDCAMPs are starting to come to BC in greater numbers. So Shannon, why don't you take this one? Talk to us about Launch and Learn EDCAMP. What is it, and when will it be held, and who is it for?
Okay, so the Launch and Learn EdCamp is going to be the morning of April 10th. It is a free EdCamp. So if anyone's ever done an EdCamp before, EdCamps are fantastic opportunities because it's actually steered by the folks who join the EdCamp. So it's not like all of us are, and shout out to Rose Pillay as well. She's also part of our one of our co-founders as well, that we, get into the EdCamp. People who have ideas that they want to share, they are then put into groups, and we have a wonderful conversation instead of it being like a series of already preset type workshops. So when you sign up for it, you will input what are the things that are of interest to you, and then you'll be put into groups, and it's going to be virtual, of course, because of COVID, and have this wonderful conversation and see where can ACBC go, like where does the conversation, where is it going to take us next? That's basically it. I'll leave it to anybody else here in the group to add to it.
Well, and is this event open to people out of province as well? Okay. All right. Would anyone like to add to that?
I just, one of the things too is one of the hopes for the Launch and Learn is kind of what good teaching would look like, where we're trying to gather information to see where people are. So if you equate it kind of like a pre-assessment, what does the field want, and what kind of supports can we offer? And so you take that information and adjust your next decisions. And that's kind of, it's like an information gathering, but what's happening for our field and how can we support? Because if we come in saying, here's what you need, those are the practices we're trying to move away from. So we're kind of mimicking good teaching and assessment practice, but also it's filling a need and really creating a network for BC educators that just, you mentioned a lot of great names that are here, but there's really not a network for people to go in BC because our context is quite different than the rest of Canada.
Well, and we do like to think of ourselves as the leaders, right, nationwide. So we are trying new things out here. And you make me think, too, in terms of just good pedagogical practices, of another British Columbian educator, Trevor McKenzie. Wouldn't we say an EdCamp sort of in some ways models some inquiry principles as well?
Mm-hmm. And design thinking.
Yeah.
Design thinking starts with empathy, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What are the needs around us? Christine says EdCamp used to connect, but also assess the field on assessment. Very meta. That's right. Yeah, it is very meta. And Mark is saying shout out to Ottawa. All right. Did I mention Ottawa, or someone did? All right. Moving on, we're starting to wrap up. What is next for the ACBC, the Assessment Consortium of BC? It's that word consortium is just amazing, by the way. What are some of your long-term goals? I'll just throw this one open to anyone. Where do you see ACBC going in the future?
I'm happy to jump in a little bit here. The site itself, and you showed it off really quickly there. So acbced.ca. It's to be honest, pretty empty right now. So we're looking to see what the BC educators need, and really with that focus of K2 post-secondary. I know Nina spoke to the post-secondary need for assessment literacy, and certainly most of the panel here are secondary trained. So expanding that out away from just secondary into what does this look like for elementary students and elementary teachers, and what does this look like at the post-secondary level, and how do we fill in that website, fill in the conferences, fill in the community with the resources that they want.
All right, anyone else?
Membership, I think. Right? Like membership, like we want to gather people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have them, be a part of this and feel like they can connect to it. So just get the numbers. That'd be great.
Shannon, how do you see ACBC, and this might be a dumb question, but how do you see ACBC coexisting, or what would be the relationship with CAFLN, with the Canadian Assessment for formative assessment for learning network?
Canadian Assessment for Learning. Well, that's a great question. Never really gave that one a lot of thought. You want to take it, Nina?
Well, you know what? I did have a conversation with Dr. Lorna Earle, and we are part of the network. Many of us are members of Canadian Assessment for Learning Network. I can't answer that question. It would have to start with a conversation with the network, but there are many of us who are members of that network, important network, and the work that they do. The one thing that I wanted to add is my hope for the consortium too is that now there is a space. Shannon has already created a space through BRC, but there's also this like province-wide space for educators to know that they're not alone, and that for me, at least, I hope that it would be a place where they could find others that they could work together with or join and feel supported by. A community. That's what I'm hoping.
We are a community, and that's a great segue into our last question, our last round of questions, and that is, how can we connect with your learning? So first of all, if you are a BC educator, maybe you're picking up this broadcast here on the YouTube replay or listening to the podcast, want to make sure that you are aware of Twitter and a Twitter chat that happens every Sunday night at 7 p.m. That's at #BCEdChat. And I don't always make it there, but I usually see some of that conversation showing up in my feed. Always helpful, always inspiring. And of course, we've got other sort of avenues and points of connection that we will talk about here as we go around. So Shannon, how else can we connect with you? And as you said at the top, you are doing so much to connect BC educators.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm busy. It's fun. Obviously, I'm on Twitter a lot, so you can connect with me there at Drama Queen BRC. I blog and I share a lot of resources. Again, I've been working a lot with building proficiency sequences and trying to build up those resources. mygrowthmindset.home.blog. Oh my man, there's Beyond Report Cards. That's my baby. Started it in 2019. And so I share a lot of information and resources. It's a go-to, I hear, from educators to find out what's that relevant podcast to listen to while I'm going for my walk, or I'm, on the Stairmaster and that kind of thing. So those are the places that you can connect with me. I'm trying to do some live stuff also on Beyond Report Cards, sharing at my staff meetings, and then sharing and then of course blogging about it. So connect with me. Join Beyond Report Cards if you're not already on there. It's for BC educators, K to post-secondary, and of course join the EDCAMP. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you, Phil, for chiming in from LinkedIn. Nina, how can we connect with you?
You can connect with me on Twitter. I join #@assessment pretty regularly. It's like a bi-monthly conversation that's led by some assessment leaders like Katie White and Tom Schimmer. And then this year I did have like a chapter in a book that's being published, and I co-authored it with my dear colleague, Jen Skelding, and it's on imaginative education and assessment in higher education. And I've been challenged. Katie White personally challenged me to write more and to share what I'm doing in my practice. So this summer, I am committing to writing more about my practice in higher ed and in teacher education. Yeah.
And Nina, I think that'll be at the graduate level kind of writing, right? Like I love the blog stuff, but
the chapter is in a book for all educators. Okay. I wrote it in a way where it's like a story of a course that Jen and I co-designed, and we infuse imaginative education pedagogy and sound formative assessment practice. And it's a beautiful story. So I hope people will read it when the book comes out. But no, Katie White really challenged me, like, start writing more about what you're doing and get it out there, not formally and in a blog format. So I'm going to write more this summer. I'm committing to that.
Yes, I'll hold you to it. And Nina, I've been so interested in the work that you and Jen are starting to offer schools about just asking that question of how do our values, the core values that we say we live by, our mission statement, how does that shape our practices in assessment? I don't know if I'm getting that perfectly right, but that's what I was picking up from Twitter the other day. Phil, how can we connect with you and continue to learn with you?
So Twitter would be the easiest way. I take part in most of the BC Ed Chat on Sunday night Twitter chats, and also the ad assessments that Nina was talking about. Both are fantastic learning opportunities. So happy to connect with you on Twitter. If you are interested in math, I have a YouTube channel, Stringer CHS, where I basically have my flipped classroom videos for my students, plus some other math-related content. I published an article on standards-based grading in the 2017 Vector magazine, the BC AMT, which I work quite closely with, doing assessment conferences with and presenting for them or with them. As well as the ISABC, the local community that my independent school is part with. I'm presenting there a lot as well.
Awesome. Love the YouTube stuff. Love that you're posting that math stuff, not just for the virtual environment that we're in now, but I just love the way that video can be recycled and repurposed and shared with a quick link for that student who needs it. And by the way, a couple of times we've heard #@assessment. That's the word @ the letters AT. Don't try to put the @ sign there. That's not going to work. Josh, over to you. How can we connect with you?
Yeah, thanks. Just a shout out to that Twitter chat at assessment. It's actually where I met a lot of the colleagues here on the panel many years ago. And definitely, like everyone else, Twitter is an easy way to get in touch with me. I used to blog a lot. If you look back to about 3.5 years ago, you'll notice not much has happened since. And that's when my kids came, and I don't look at that as a deficit. That is fantastic. And I'm trying to find a way to evolve with that. And like Nina, I know that this summer is something that I really want to make intentional about, connecting with practices that are happening for me as a physical and health educator, but also my classroom practices as well. In the areas of PHE, there's not a lot of stuff around assessment out there. And the presentations I've done at provincial and national conferences, people are like, how do I learn out more? So I really want to be intentional of getting, here's what I'm trying, and here's the success, or here's where I'm going to grow with that. So just trying to blog a bit more about classroom practices and my practices in the physical and health education setting as well.
Josh, something I didn't mention earlier, but I feel like PHE, as we call it here in British Columbia, is sort of the final frontier for assessment, honestly, because I think a lot of educators are on board with this idea of, going gradeless in different ways and proficiency scales. But our PHE teachers, their response is, what do you mean I can't give a mark based on their attitude in gym class today, right? The great carrot and stick is removed. And I think that idea scares a lot of physical instruction
Two
teachers.
pieces on that. Two pieces.
Sure.
One, PE or PHE class, not gym class. There is a difference, and you will get lambasted on social media if you post that. So
that's why I called it PHE to begin with. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And two, there is stuff happening at the national level and here in BC at the provincial level on some assessment pedagogy and practices to help move our field forward. Definitely.
Yeah, awesome. So those resources are out there. Katie, it is a beautiful morning where you are. Clearly, how can we connect with you?
I have the sun coming through, but I'm not going to complain about it because we really need this here. Twitter's best for me. Absolutely. Of course, I'm on the School District 57 website for Prince George Secondary School. I do have some stuff on YouTube, but really it's around wellness and yoga. And honestly, I think that all the heavy lifting that this team is doing and teachers are doing and administrators are doing, there is always space for breathing and calm and centering so that we can continue to be rebels like Nina and Shannon have said, and we can continue to do the hard work. So I do have some of that, but that's the best way to connect with me.
It's holistic, right, Katie? We've got to be healthy and well in order to take on any of this stuff. And in order to move our professional journey forward, we've got to be in a place where we can accommodate that change. And I think one thing we're dealing with right now in the year of COVID, we can all say from our different contexts, is teachers are tired. Teachers are tired. Teachers are stretched. And professional development and growth is a tough sell. Unfortunately, it is a tough sell for many educators right now. But it's not a tough sell for these five. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And for all of our viewers, we so appreciate having you with us wherever you are. Keep that fire for learning burning bright. Take care. Stay safe. We are making our way through this year. We're almost at the finish line. But until then, let's keep growing, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.